Settlers of Catan is a competitive strategy board game released in the 90s, and it's become extremely popular over the last 30 years. However, playing Catan requires getting 4 friends together in person, so to make practicing the game easier, a website was developed by a separate company called Colonist that allows players to play an alternative to the social and strategy board game Settlers of Catan, which uses the same rule set as Catan. The website also has an elo system that lets players compete with each other, and recently, an unknown player managed to hit the #1 spot out of nowhere. This was unique because it's not like you can add extra cards to your hand or play extra pieces since you're not at a table, and messing with the website would have been readily apparent to the players in the game, so the question is, how did they cheat? In today's video, we're going to get a rundown on Catan and how to play it, then analyze a game where cheating is taking place to see if you can catch anything suspicious before revealing how the cheating was performed. So get your detective hats and let's get into it. To understand how this cheater was caught, we need to get a brief overview of how Catan is played. At the start of a game, players take turns placing settlements on the board until they each play 2. When placing settlements, they must be 2 spaces apart, and during the setup, you get to place a road with them for free, but on later turns, you can only place settlements with a road going to them. The objective of the game is to be the first player to get 10 points, with settlements counting as 1 point, upgrading them to cities counting as 2, the player with the longest road getting an extra 2 points, and the player who uses the most knight cards also getting an extra 2 points, with each of these costing specific resources to build. The most straightforward way to win is building settlements and upgrading them to cities until you're at 10 points. However, this costs a lot of resources, so getting the most knight cards or building the longest road can be a shortcut because of the bonus. But the extra points aren't guaranteed, as a player that builds a longer road or amasses more knight cards will take the bonus from you. So you might be thinking, how do you get resources? To get resources, dice are rolled on each player's turn, and any settlements bordering a hex with the number rolled produces resources of that type. This is the general progression of how the game plays out, but with these mechanics, the game would largely be decided by the roll of the dice, as there isn't much room for human decision. And this is where trading comes in. After a player rolls the dice, they have the option of trading resources with other players or the bank, with the bank taking 4 of a single resource in exchange for 1, or if you have a settlement on a port, you can get reduced rates. But when trading with players, you're free to set the rate at whatever you want between yourselves, as long as each of you offer at least 1 resource, so no free trades. The most important thing to keep in mind when trading is that you don't want to give another player resources without getting something in return. So if you're trying to upgrade into a city, it doesn't make much sense to trade away your wheat for wood, as that only helps another player while setting yourself back. Now that we know the basics of Catan, it's time to evaluate a game, and I'll tell you ahead of time that there is something below board taking place in this match, so be extra vigilant and maybe you can catch it. In the opening turn, we see that orange is sitting on 2 ports and 4 different resources, with red having a foothold in wool and grain. Black has access to every resource, although they're weak on brick, and blue has access to 4 resources with a slant towards brick. After the first turn and a half, we see that orange and black both try and claim the same port, with black being successful, having done so without trading. But blue calls this a plow in chat, which is when you intentionally build a road to block another player's efforts. A few turns later, we see the first trade of the game being discussed, with black offering many different resources for a brick, before orange agrees to a 3-for-1 trade, with black then plowing blue. A few turns later, orange asks for a trade that is ignored at first until black replies with wool NB after he rolls a 7, which means he can move the robber. So let's explain how the robber works and what NB means. When a player rolls a 7, they can move the robber to any tile they want, and once there, it will steal a resource from one of the players that has a settlement bordering that tile. The term NB means no block, so black is saying he won't block orange's tiles with the robber as long as he trades him a sheep. So he blocks blue's wool. However, orange doesn't like the trade that black proposed for the wool, so black accuses orange of lying. But before they can settle the disagreement, red accepts getting wood from black in exchange for a wool. After this, the next trade that takes place is red offering wood for wheat, with black countering for an extra stone from the deal, to which red accepts, using their wood to trade the bank and building 2 roads and a settlement, 3 actions on a single turn. At this point in the game, we see blue and red are 1 road away from having the longest road in play. Orange is 1 knight card away from having the largest army, and while black isn't competing for the road or army card, they are tied with orange for first in points. Black then upgrades into a city, putting them in first, with blue placing the robber on their tile, and as more players start upgrading to cities, we see black trade red 2 wood for a single stone, which he builds 2 roads with. It's at this point where black points out that orange can double play from the current position, which is a strategy where you get the longest road and most knight cards. So red moves to block orange from getting brick with the robber. And in desperate need for brick, orange trades the bank 4 wood for a single resource and gets the longest road card, putting him 3 points from winning. We see black trade to red again and make a city, then blue complains to black that he could have stopped orange if black hadn't have plowed him earlier. A few turns later, black is lobbying for the other players to form a coalition against orange to stop him from winning, with blue and red performing 2 trades in a turn so that blue can build the longest road. Looking at the current standings, black and orange are tied for first, but black has a hidden dev card which gives an additional point, so they're actually in the lead, with orange at 5 and red at 4. But orange uses a knight to activate the army bonus and jumps back into the lead, being only a city and road away from victory. Eventually, orange builds a road while sitting on 8 resource cards, and it looks like they're about to take the longest road card back, but instead they build a settlement and attribute it to a misclick. Black then says they want to build a road in an attempt to block orange and has a massive trade with red, giving a single wool for a wood and 2 wheat, then trading 9 wheat for 3 brick through their port and building roads to steal the card from orange. On orange's turn, they use a development card that lets them build 2 roads for free, winning them the game on the spot. So let's tally up the final stats and see if you can spot what happened. Looking at the endgame statistics, we see orange is the clear winner, with black being in second with 7 points and having the second longest road. Red finished third with 5 points, one of which came from a development card, and blue finished in fourth, being 2 knights away from having the largest army. Looking at the trade data, we see that black and red perform the most trades, with orange and blue each performing 2. But if we take away bank trades, we see that black had a single trade with orange and 5 with red, while red had a single trade with black, blue had a single trade with red, and orange doing no trading with other players. Breaking it down further, we see that blue actioned after both trades they made, as did orange, with red actioning after all 4 trades they offered, although 3 of these were with the bank. This leaves black, who actioned off 7 of the 9 trades they did, 2 of which were off of bank trades. This doesn't count the proposed trades that players made, only the successful ones, as throughout the game, trades were offered but declined on multiple occasions. So my question to you is, given all of this information, what do you think is going on? Leave a comment down below with your prediction, because we're about to unveil what happened in this game. Upon analysis of the game by DandyDrew, the current American national champion, it was alleged that black and red were both cheating, as red was funneling cards to black the entire game while not actively trying to win the game themselves. And now it's time to dive into how this was caught. On June 20th, DandyDrew was tipped off that the current #1 ranked player, GrannyBoy47, had suspicious activity going on in his ranked play games. Drew decided to look at some games and recorded his live reaction to them, and what he found was a match history with a peculiarity. The player GBXLVII was present in lots of Granny Boy's 4-player matches. In fact, if you look at Granny Boy's match history, he wins an overwhelming number of games where the GB account is playing with him, and in his last 100 games, he only lost 2 where the GB account was a participant. Looking at the GB account, we see something even more bizarre. Of its last 100 games, 27 of them were against Granny Boy, and they never won a single one of those. When they did play in 4-player games that weren't with Granny Boy, they did manage to win a few, but their win record was only about 25%. and there was something else very odd about this player's match history. Looking at their recent games, you'll see large swaths of bot games that only lasted a few seconds, and it's worth noting that bot games have no bearing on your elo. The only theory that Drew and the community have for why this was happening was that they were trying to hide their match history of playing with Granny Boy. Another detail that some of you may have picked up on already is that the GBXLVII account is just the initials and Roman numerals of Granny Boy 47, which seems obvious once it's pointed out, but nobody knew at the time that these accounts were connected in any way. And it's time we looked at the biggest indicator of foul play. In one of the games Drew analyzed, we see the GB account trading with Granny Boy a lot. And looking at this particular trade, we see that GB offered a stone for a brick, with Granny Boy counter-offering to trade his brick for 2 stone, which GB accepts. This trade is peculiar because Granny Boy is the player currently in the lead, and he needs exactly 2 ore to upgrade his settlement to a city, which GB gives him, but GB doesn't get anything he can use from this trade. One of the players in the game recognizes that something is amiss and points out this obvious bad trade in chat. All the while, GB is making additional trades with Granny Boy, and even more interesting is that almost every trade GB does with Granny Boy results in Granny Boy being able to action, and this was noticed by Drew when he was analyzing matches.
And here we go, the counter trades. Let's take a look here. There it is. So how does this change, right? You notice every time they trade, it's just actioning him.
On another turn, GB gives wheat to Granny Boy in exchange for a brick, and while this does allow him to build a settlement, it allows Granny Boy to action another city, putting him even further ahead, with the poor players in chat believing that GB was just a bad player, as they note he has a 25% win rate in Platinum. But, my sweet summer children, if only you knew the truth. Looking back to the game we analyzed, one of the trades that GB made with Granny Boy, he gave a wool in exchange for wood. If we look at each player's hand, we see that this allows Granny Boy to action a development card, which he does. But looking at GB's hand, we see something strange. They have 3 wood, a wool, 2 wheat, and an ore for resources, so they're 1 brick away from making a settlement on the port they have open. Giving up their wool doesn't make any sense, since it puts them further away from placing the settlement. And on their next turn, they give away an ore and a wood to Granny Boy, then trade the bank to place 2 roads from a dev card and build a settlement. The only reason they were able to build the settlement was from the resources that were rolled up on other players' turns. They had no knowledge that they would receive those resources from the rolls, so trading themselves further away from a settlement on the previous turn makes no sense. And there are plenty of examples of bad trades. Of the games Drew looked at, the GB account didn't make a single trade with anyone except Granny Boy, and many of the trades make 0 sense once analyzed. Take this one for instance. GB has 4 ore in hand, and Granny Boy is offering ore for a wood, which GB accepts. This stops GB from building another road or city and achieves nothing for them, but it does allow Granny Boy to build on the port, after which they immediately start trash talking about. So what does GB do with the ore? Here's Drew once again.
I'm curious, what did they do with the ore? He just threw all the ore away. All the ore that he needed for his city, and he decided, I'm going to drop roads. I'm going to end the game on 6 points.
So they aren't even trying to win the game, they're just taking away a strategy from other players so Granny Boy can win. One peculiar game was noticed by Flying Chinaman, as the GB account has the win in hand if they use a night card but decide not to do it. And on a later turn, Granny Boy has the win if he builds a road, but for whatever reason, he opts not to do it, with Blue winning the next turn, suggesting that the person colluding isn't very good at the game to begin with. If you look at the match history, the games are filled with trades and interactions just like this, and after Drew posted his video, colonists banned the accounts later that day. So, let's recap the evidence. There are 2 accounts that are similarly named appearing in many games together, and when they're in the same match, the GB account performs nonsensical trades with Granny Boy to the detriment of their prospects of winning, while Granny Boy actions off almost every trade they perform together. And given the history of trading in the match history when these accounts play together, many people came to the conclusion that they were colluding. This has been an interesting look at a cheating scandal, as it's not every day you see someone decide to play below board in a board game. And if you want to play Catan with me, I'll be on Colonist's website playing some casual and ranked games over the next few days. Thanks to DandyDrew for help with this video, and you can check out his channel below. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next exciting episode of Abyssoft Z.